All right. Hey, everyone. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are on episode 42 of 𝐑𝐞𝐯𝐢𝐞𝐳. Today, we have a guest coming to us from the other side of the world, which is exciting. We have Ben Stanberry. We're going to be speaking, he's the director of Prosper, and we're going to be speaking on brand identity for accountants. This is something unique that we haven't spoken on. So we're very excited to have Ben on. Ben, how's it going?
Very well, thanks. Thanks very much for the invite, Chris. I appreciate you reaching out.
For sure, for sure. So tell us about yourself.
So I am a graphic designer and brand identity specialist. My design agency, is on the Essex Suffolk border in the UK, in the southeast of the UK. It's called Prosper, and I specialise in developing brand identity for accountants, CPAs, and financial consultants. We've niched Prosper pretty hard, and for that reason we rank globally really well on Google, and I've been lucky enough to work with clients in the UK obviously, but as well as Canada and in the US, and we get inquiries from all over. So yeah, it's something I'm really passionate about, and we noticed there was definitely a requirement in the accounting industry for some more considered brand identity development and visual identity. So I decided in 2018 to make that my focus.
Yeah. So how did you get started in the specifically in the accounting industry? Because branding is for everything, everyone. And so how did you get involved into the accounting industry here?
So I had a crossroads, and I decided that I was going to niche my company before I rebranded it to Prosper. And I've done sort of quite a lot of work in like festival branding and events branding, and I'd also done a fair bit of work through in accountants branding and for tax consultants. And so I decided I was going to specialize, and I decided to go down the route of the accounting branding, and I felt that there was definitely more of a need for that, and I thought that was something that I could go a little bit deeper on. And so as part of that, I researched 500 accounting firms in Essex and Kent and Cambridge in the UK, which are counties in the southeast of the UK, as well as London. And I looked at sort of 16 different metrics to do with how they present themselves online and how they name themselves, how they approach color combinations, their logo design, etc. And I've published that as a body of research, which is available on the Prosper website. And I'm currently working with a lady in the US called 𝐂𝐥𝐢𝐞𝐳, and from the CPA growth firm, and we are doing the same thing for 500 firms in the US as well, which we'll publish in first quarter of 2022.
It's an awesome story, because when you think of branding, right, you think of Apple, Nike, Samsung, Starbucks, BMW, but branding and accounting, it's like what is branding, and what, it's more than a logo, I'm assuming, but how do you find it, and how does it correlate with the accounting world?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of people, when you say, what is a brand, I say, well, it's just a logo, but it isn't. There's actually a difference between a brand and branding and then marketing. And so a brand is not necessarily a tangible thing. It is essentially, to paraphrase Marty Neumeier, a brand is the gut feeling that your audience will have about your company, and it's the impression that you give about your company. But your branding is the way that you put that forward. And so it's using your colors, it's using typography, it's the tone of voice that you use in the language on your website, for example, and it's using photography, and it's all of these visual elements that it's the way to represent your brand, basically. One of the ways I like to look at it is, if you're trying to create an impression about a company. So to use an example, if you were a funeral parlor, for example, and you were developing your brand and your brand identity, your visual identity, you wouldn't perhaps have bright pinks and sky blues and yellows, and you wouldn't have, Johnson Funeral Parlor written in, say, a Comic Sans typeface, because visually your branding is not giving the right impression. And so the brand is the feeling you need to give about your company, or the feeling that customers have about your company, and your branding and your brand identity is the way that you translate that feeling into something visual for people to understand, because we're visual animals, and so that's how we'll interpret brand, is through these visual cues such as color, etc.
Yes, I well said. I couldn't agree more, because I believe that Apple is such a great brand. I feel like a lot of times that I may be paying way over than the actual product's worth. But I mean, I have a watch, I have a phone, I have the MacBook, and it's all about the brand, right? And so I completely get that. But now, where do you see accountants investing, and what would they what do you see them investing in, and then when do you see them kind of rebranding themselves?
Well, I think accountants will often come to the stage, a lot with any business really, it's not exclusive to accountants, but they'll come to a realization that they may need to have a rebrand, and this can come from a couple of ways. And the first is that they may look around their own industry at their competition, and they may feel that their competition is branding, have recently rebranded, and they're looking really sharp, and they're looking ultra modern, and they're beginning to appeal to that sort of younger generation of business owners. And they may look at their own brand and say, I don't feel we're sort of up to scratch now with what the newer sort of fresher companies are doing. So they may choose to rebrand themselves to raise the bar. And another way, which I see in the UK, is that they may look around and say, you know, we've got this sort of grey and blue colour scheme. We've got a very non-committal lead statement on our website that doesn't really tell anyone anything. And they may wish to sort of separate themselves from that side of things, and they say, well, you know, we want to raise the bar a little bit for our own brand and differentiate ourselves, and so we don't look the same as everyone else. So that's two reasons. There's similar reasons, but they come out of the same sphere, that they want to raise the bar or separate themselves away. And another reason, quite common, is they might just feel that their business and their services have really outgrown their current branding and their brand identity. They might feel that it's no longer appealing to the sort of customers they want. It's no longer appealing to the sort of talent and staff they're looking to attract. And so they might feel it's time to refresh or rebrand, perhaps change their name, and just give themselves a good makeover to reflect more of what they represent in this current time.
Yeah, and I think it's very important now for branding and attracting talent for staff, because it's not about folks who are now working, you know, 100 billable hours a week, and you know, they're the champion in that aspect. It's more about what, for a new candidate seeking a job in this profession, it's more about what can your firm do for me? Why do I want to work for your firm? How is your firm different than any others? I feel that it's a different mindset with millennials and Gen Z coming into play here. And so how do you see accountants kind of making themselves stand out and differentiating themselves for their clients, but also staff?
Yeah, so for the staff, that's a big challenge we're facing the accounting industry, is attracting and retaining that talent. And so this comes down to what is known as employer branding, and this definitely does cross over into like the HR space, which I'm not an expert on. But to look at your employer branding is to position your firm that is going to be attractive to potential staff, and also operating a culture and making sure, you know, you have this internal culture that makes you make perhaps younger staff want to stay as well. So again, from the very, very top level, you need to make sure that you're a firm that is looking differentiated visually. You know, you're not sort of in this grey and blue, really cliched sort of visuals that doesn't separate you at all. You need to make sure that your website is engaging and modern. If it's 2021, 2022 and your website isn't working on a mobile device, then you're not going to be attracting that sort of talent to your firm, because they're going to say, well, these guys look like they're stuck in the past, you know. And I think it's a lot about like your internal staff culture. How can you demonstrate that you can nurture your new prospects? You know, what can you do for them to help nurture their career in your firm? And when people are seeking for roles that you're advertising, I mean, it's guaranteed that they're going to be looking at your firm's website. So I would consider having a meet the team page to show your staff members. Think about the photography on that meet the team page. It doesn't have to be very sort of grid based and very hierarchy based like so many of them are. You could have a more relaxed group photo, for example. Often meet the team pages will feature sort of fun tidbits about the clients, about the staff, such as favorite movie and little known fact, etc., etc. So by developing these sort of pages, you're really like humanizing the company a bit as well, and I think that's worth doing. And also you can consider having a careers or a work with us page on your website, and that can be a separate section on your website to current vacancies, but this could be a page that talks about what staff can expect when they come and work at your firm, how you might nurture them, how you might train them, and you need to talk about softer factors beyond just salary and how many weeks holiday you get. I mean, there's more things that you can talk about that are going to be appealing to that younger generation of employees. They're going to be looking for a firm that share their values as well. So if you can talk about your environmental and social policies, and whether you support certain charities, and just reflecting values that will resonate with that younger members of staff who are perhaps in their 20s or their 30s that are looking to get a job in your firm, or certainly that you're looking to try and attract to your firm, shall I say.
Yeah, there's one of our clients is a virtual CFO firm, and on their website they create caricatures of all their staff, and they're all remote, and so now not only are there caricatures, they're where they work from, like the state. And so you scroll over it and it shows their actual picture, right? And they have folks with us in India, and so the same thing's done over there. And you're right, going to seeking to work for this firm, it looks fun, right? It looks relaxed. It looks like, wow, they're remote, they're modern, they're with the times, and they hire globally, right? And so I absolutely agree with that. But now you got everyone, the accounting world's excited, ready to do this, but where do you see some challenges that they're facing initially, and what can they do to get this off the ground effectively?
Well, in terms of employer branding,
as well as for if they're rebranding it within their firm. You talked about the website, you talked about changing the colors. What are some other things that they could do?
So I think if you were considering a full rebrand for a firm, you need to sort of do some strategy work beforehand. Your brand actually falls into, there's your internal brand and there's your external brand. And your internal brand is your brand values, your brand vision, your mission, your positioning statement, understanding who you're serving, and developing that sort of USP and developing that point of difference. Now, all of that sort of thing is the internal brand, which will be developed with the stakeholders of the firm through sort of strategy sessions with the branding agency. And then what you have, the result of that is that you interpret that visually through your external brand. And your external brand is the things that the person on the street will see. Okay, so you've got to make sure, for a start, you can think about your company name. Now, my research showed that almost 3/4 of the firms that I looked at were named either after their founders or they were initialisms of their founders. And so you might have Smith & Johnson Accountants or RSJP Accountants. Now, as a name, that's not memorable in the slightest. It's not very interesting. It's not very memorable. And a firm that's just named after the founder's name doesn't lend itself to very interesting brand identity, because where do you really go with that? So it's worth seeking out an agency, for example, that could take you through a naming process. And if you can come up with a name for your firm that is a little bit more inventive, a little bit more evocative, then that would definitely lend itself to a more interesting branding, and it's likely to be far more memorable because you along with your logo, your name is the most recalled aspect of your brand identity. So it's really important that stands out. I think we're past having to name firms after the founder's surname in this day and age. And beyond that, to go through some other ways that you can differentiate would be your color schemes. I see that sort of 53% of firms that I looked at just use blue and grey as their key color schemes, and I think, well, why? It's so uninspiring, and there's plenty more that you could do. It just doesn't have to be blue and grey. It's worth looking at your positioning statement, which takes me sort of down the route of whether you should consider niching your firm into a particular client base or into a discipline within the accounting realm. If you niche, it allows you to understand your client a little bit better. It allows you to write far better targeted content for your blog articles and develop thought leadership. Because if you say we're a proactive team of accountants that work with businesses large and small, then I've learned nothing about your firm. I mean, that there's no differentiation within that statement itself. And a positioning statement isn't part of your internal brand, and you would sort of reword that onto your website. But think about what the very lead-in statement on your website is, and does that really give you a point of difference? You know, further things that you would look at is your website design. It doesn't need to be filled with text. It doesn't need to be cluttered. You know, it should have elements and space to breathe when you scroll through. It should work on mobile devices, etc. And a big one, it would be good to see more firms writing original blog content. And for firms in the UK, I don't mean just feeding like an HMI newsfeed into a page on your website and calling it a blog, because that isn't a blog and it isn't thought leadership in it at all. But actual writing targeted content. And again, if you do niche, then you will be able to write that sort of content a lot easier. And it allows you to give real substance to your social media as well. If you go ahead and do that, you can share that content. And as we've touched on, employer branding, and that's sort of 7 elements there as a starting point that you can differentiate your firm.
Yeah. So as you mentioned about the name, I was looking at my upcoming calls for today. I usually do about 10 calls, speak to 10 different clients every day, all around the globe. And I'm looking at each of the firms' names, and it is all of it's you know, firm name and company. It's the name of the owner and company, name of the owner, and I'm like, holy cow, that is just an easy starting point, because that kind of, it could be a law firm, or it could just be, it's not exciting. I totally get it. Yeah, I'm just looking here at all the different names. So I didn't even think of that, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And so 10 calls, I just looked at literally 7 of them, and all 7 had the owner name tied into it. So
the problem is that they're not memorable. You wouldn't be able to go and recall that,
right,
you know, 5 or 6 days later. But for your own firm, Entigrity, obviously you've gone through a naming process there, because that is like an evocative name, and so it's memorable. So it's definitely something that has been overlooked, and it should be given more consideration, you know. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned about research that you've done. So how long have you been doing this, and what are some of the trends and some of the findings that you've discovered?
Yeah, sure. So it was in late 2019 that we finished up the research, and we published it in early 2020. And like I say, we looked at 500 accountants' websites and branding in Essex, Kent and Cambridge, and as well as in the boroughs of London. And we looked at everything from what logo style did they have? Was it a word mark? Is it a graphic device? Is it an emblem? Is it a shield, for example? Or we looked at the color schemes of their websites, the color schemes of their logos and word marks. How many Google reviews did they have? What social media platforms did they have? How did they approach naming, evocative naming, founder-based naming, etc., etc. And we looked at some technical Google not rankings, we looked at a thing called Google Lighthouse, which gives you various scores. So I looked at those as well. Yeah, and call to actions, that was the big one. I took the lead statements from 500 of the websites and I ran all of those sentences through. I never know how to describe this, like an engine basically that told me what the most popular words were in use in these positioning statements, and then it sort of gave me an idea to understand what the most popular phrases we used on accountants firms as well. And we just compiled all of that into a 36-page report, which you can download on the Prosper website. It's free to download. And it's quite an interesting insight. I don't think, well, there's no one else that's done it in the UK, and it gave me a bit of a view onto how accountants approach website design and how they approach brand identity, really. So, which helps us advise clients what not to do if they want to differentiate their firms.
Yeah, no. And speaking with clients, we work with them with offshore staff, but every day I get asked about marketing, I get asked about IT consulting, and so the awareness is there. They're starting to become more proactive about it and wanting to make changes. And so yeah, everything you spoke about and the research too is very valuable. So awesome that you've done that. And so wrapping up today, any final thoughts for our audience? It's just some really insightful content, but yeah, any final thoughts today?
I think just be braver with your branding. Don't just follow what has been done before. If you're working with an agency and you say, well, a lot of accountants have blue and grey, and they say, well, that sounds like a great idea, and they just do it. They should be pushing back. If you're hiring them as experts to help brand you, they should be pushing back on the sort of standard assumptions. Be braver with your naming. Remember that your brand isn't just your logo. Your brand is everything. So it's your colours, it's your name. Another biggie is photography. We see a lot of firms using very, very sort of lazy stock photography, and it would be nice to sort of up the game on that. If your photography is really, really poor on your website, I actually think it is condescending to the people that are visiting your site as well. I mean, it can get that bad. I've written lots of articles on this, which you can find over on my blog. But yes, differentiate yourself, focus especially on your meet the team pages, and try and also resonate. Your website needs to resonate with potential staff as well as your customers. So have a look at like your employer branding, develop an employer branding value proposition, and understand how a young person the things they want to know and the reassurance that they might seek when they come to work with your firm. And yeah, everything I talk about that just comes under this banner of get your brand right and make sure you're deliberately differentiated from the next firm.
Sure, for sure. Absolutely. Well, Ben, thank you so much for taking time out and speaking to our audience today. Really appreciate this, and I totally believe in the whole branding idea. I mean, I am very loyal to the brand, and looking at what some of the firms are doing now, and there's changes to be done, right? Yeah. And it's time to be creative, break the boundary, and stand out, right? It's not just for other industries, for the accounting industry too. So let's go ahead and do it. And so folks like you, really appreciate it. Right. So to our audience, thanks for listening in. We'll be back soon with another episode. But for now, everybody, take care, be safe. Ben, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.